Next on Heisman Talk, all you need to know about the SEC during the offseason. Here's your host, the Nate Dog.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Heisman Talk. It's been about a month since I've been on the air, but I'm happy to be back. Been a busy month with school and everything. But yeah, let's get back into it. Today we're going to talk about the SEC and recruiting, along with a few other topics. Obviously, the SEC has been dominant for many years, and I think most would agree that the SEC is probably the best conference in all of college football. And recruiting goes to show, if anything else hasn't. Congratulations to LSU for winning the national championship. I know I have not recorded a video since then. They were absolutely dominant. They destroyed Georgia and they exposed Clemson. And it wasn't even close. I kind of figured it would be that way, but I was kind of hoping for a closer game. But obviously, at the end of the day, SEC is on top again. As far as recruiting goes, SEC, again, dominant. They take 7 out of the top 10 teams in recruiting this year, with Georgia, again, moving up to number 1. Very impressive by Kirby Smart and what he's done with that program in the last 4 years. 3 out of the last 4 of them being number 1 recruiting classes. Still no national championship. Will this year be the year? Guess we'll have to find out. So first, let's start with LSU. So LSU wins the national championship, but they lose Joe Brady to the Carolina Panthers, and they lose their defensive coordinator to Baylor to be the new head coach at Baylor. So they lose those 2 guys, and then on top of that, they lose their star quarterback and Heisman Trophy winner, Joe Burrow. Now, obviously, a lot of questions are speculating going into the offseason as to whether was this Coach O's magic or was this Joe Brady's magic or was it all of his assistants' magic, you know? And so I guess this is where we're going to find out who LSU is and who Coach O is. Of course, they finish off number 4 in recruiting this year with 3 5-stars, 14 4-stars, and 7 3-stars, which is pretty impressive in itself. Not the top 4 recruiting class. You can't really complain. Obviously, you would expect them to have the number 1 recruiting class being national champions. Obviously, Clemson did that last year. Or, yes, was it last year? I think it was last year. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, yeah. So, a lot of questions to be answered. For me personally, I don't know if Coach O can get the job done. I think they'll have a great season. I think they'll probably go 10-2 with a loss to Alabama and possibly a loss to maybe a Florida or Auburn. Or possibly A&M. They have to play at A&M and at Auburn, I believe, the last 2 out of the 3 weeks in their schedule. So it's not going to be easy for them by any means. But we'll see. But going back to what I was saying, Coach O was obviously the interim coach at Tennessee and kind of left them in the dust and told recruits not to go back there. And then you had him at USC with the Trojans, and he really wasn't that impressive. I think the best season he had was 7-9 or something like that, in the ballpark, in that range. But obviously at LSU the year before last, they had a pretty good season. They come into Death Valley and beat Georgia soundly when Georgia was number 3. But they couldn't quite get over the hump. This year they get over the hump. They have arguably one of the best seasons in all of college football history, unless you're looking at probably the early 2000s Miami team. However, their 6 top 10 wins was extremely impressive, and it's a season we'll never forget, obviously. So yeah, my prediction is that I don't think LSU is necessarily on the decline, but I don't think they're going to be as good as people probably think they will be. But we shall see. So let's talk about Georgia. Georgia makes it to the national championship in 2017. They win the Rose Bowl. They beat Baker Mayfield at the Rose Bowl. Have a huge year. Unfortunately, they lose some very key players, including Roquan Smith and a few other guys that really made up their defense that got them there, although their offense was very explosive. Obviously, with Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, they lose those 2 guys. This year is a little bit different. Fast forward, This will be the first time that they have a new quarterback in 3 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can respond to that. They bring in, obviously, a grad transfer in Jamie Newman, who's predicted to be on one of the top 3 Heisman finalists, and projected also to be the number 1 quarterback in the SEC. I haven't had much time to watch film on him, but from what I've seen, he's very mobile. I even read a stat that said his best lineman at Wake Forest was Georgia's 8th overall lineman, which kind of just shows what he had to work with, and with how much of an impressive season he had, you have to think that he's going to have a breakout season this year with Georgia and the skills players in the O-line that are provided to him. There's no reason not to go off this year. But I kind of wanted to talk about recruiting. Obviously, again, Georgia finishes number 1, third time in 4 years. Kirby Smart, obviously getting paid for his recruiting. He's done a remarkable job, with some credit to his assistants, including Sam Pittman, who is now at Arkansas, which we'll get into in a little bit. But let's just talk about a few of these guys. I mean, you got Kendall Milton, 6'2", 215 out of California, 4-star running back according to 24/7 recruiting, possibly a 5-star in my opinion. This guy is so fast. He reminds me a lot of Todd Gurley, maybe more so Derrick Henry in size. Big body, big frame. I think he's going to be explosive. You put him and Zamir White in the backfield, and you're looking at something dangerous. And that's not even including James Cook and Kenny McIntosh and the other guys they got back there. So, again, there's really no excuse for them not to be successful this year. We'll skip down a little bit. They bring in a 4-star quarterback in Carson Beck. This guy is very big-bodied as well, 6'4.5", 226 out of Jacksonville, Florida. Again, another guy that could potentially be a 5-star in my opinion. But needless to say, obviously he's a great quarterback. They bring in Jamie Newman with some experience. Maybe some quarterback competition in the spring. I think Jamie Newman wins the job. But this is a good opportunity for Carson Beck to kind of just sit back, work on his craft, and learn from Jamie Newman, and next year come out shining. And if something were to happen to Jamie Newman, it's good to know that we have him to have Carson Beck behind him. I think a big guy on everyone's name is Keely Ringo out of Arizona. 5-star corner, 6'2", 205. In a day and age where wide receivers are getting taller and faster and bigger and all that good stuff, training is just phenomenal. You kind of need guys to match that. No longer are you going after corners that are 5'10", 5'11", but if you don't have defensive backs that are 6'1" to 6'3", you're missing out. And so Georgia went out and got this guy in Keely Ringo, and I think he is going to be explosive. He's obviously the number 1 defensive back and number 4 national player. I obviously think he's going to be starting right away. They lose J.R. Reed. They lose a few other guys. A few guys are coming back. So Georgia's going to be still experienced in the backfield, or at defensive back and safety and all that good stuff. But, yeah, Keely Ringo is going to be a great addition to Georgia's defense. And then the guy that people weren't really sure about, probably one of the biggest dudes ever in Georgia's recruiting class, Darnell Washington, tight end out of Las Vegas, Nevada, coming in at a heaping 6'7.5", almost 6'8", basically, 261. I mean, think about LeBron James. I think he's, 6'8", 250 or something around there. I read an article that Darnell actually has a larger wingspan than LeBron. So this guy is just a straight-up man-child. And it's just very, very impressive. You watch film on him, and he doesn't even have to jump. He just catches the ball over the guys, and it's just crazy. So if you get a chance, check out this guy's film. It's something else, I tell you what. So let's talk about South Carolina. with Will Muschamp. And actually, before we get there, I'd like to say that it's probably one of the funniest things ever that Will Muschamp's son actually just signed with Georgia as a preferred walk-on quarterback. I can understand why he wouldn't want to maybe go play for his dad just because of tension. It just seems like it could possibly create a disaster. Not a disaster, more so just arguing. And it wouldn't be a good idea. But it is kind of funny to me and ironic that he would come to South Carolina's one of their biggest rivals in Georgia. So going back to South Carolina, Will Muschamp has done an incredible job in recruiting, obviously. When you're going up against these big guys in Georgia and Alabama and LSU and Auburn and Texas A&M and Florida, and the list goes on, it can be very difficult to recruit guys in. And for Muschamp to bring in 8 4-stars and 1 5-star is really impressive. And hats off to Will, to Coach Muschamp. Now, one thing that's on everyone's mind is can they get over the hump now? Can they get a key win? Can they beat Georgia again? Obviously, they beat them this past year, and I don't know if that was a fluke win or if Georgia was having an off day or what was going on. But obviously, that wasn't Georgia's best game. And you kind of wonder if they can repeat it. You kind of wonder if they can have a successful season this year. I think a successful season for South Carolina would be, let's go, how many games do they play? 12? Let's go 8-4. If it's on a 12-game schedule, I think that's how many games they play. 8-4, not 9-3, somewhere around there. I think if they can lose to Georgia, lose to Alabama, and pick up a key win against Tennessee or Auburn, or maybe even A&M, I think that'd be big for South Carolina. So then we talk about Arkansas. Arkansas finished 30th in recruiting this year, which is, again, a great place to be in if you're an Arkansas Razorback. If you're a Razorback, you should be very happy, very pleased with what Sam Pittman has been able to put together in the last few months. I'm going to look at my notes, scroll down a little bit. They finished with 4 4-stars, 17 3-stars. I'm not sure how many of those guys were coming in under Chad Morris, but obviously, they still have to like what Sam Pittman's doing, and I sure as do. I sure as heck like what Sam Pittman's doing over there at Arkansas. He's an Arkansas boy. He was an assistant there, and now he gets to have his dream job as a head coach. I'll never forget the day that he got hired and just the emotion and passion that he has for the Razorback Nation. It's remarkable. You're getting a phenomenal guy on and off the field, a phenomenal recruiter. This guy recruited in so many good O-linemen for Georgia. I mean, I have to give most of the credit. Although Matt Luke has done a very fine job coming in and keeping those recruits at Georgia, Sam Pittman was really the guy behind the scenes that got those guys to come in the first place. And even after he left, I remember reading something about him telling a few of the recruits to stay at Georgia. And, that's just... That's who he is as a person. He would never wish anything bad upon Georgia, and he would never backstab them. He would never go out of his way to say, hey, I'm coming to Arkansas. Why don't you come here? He wants them to go to the best place for them. And I really respect that. So with that being said, I think a good season for Arkansas would be, I don't think they'll have a winning record, but I think if they can win 2 or 3 SEC and conference games, I'd say it's pretty successful. And then obviously the following year, you're going to want them to do a little bit better. But don't be surprised if they have if they come out with 7 wins this year. I think that's a solid number. I think that's a good number for them to have. and tell me what you think in the comments. Again, new head coach in the SEC and Lane Kiffin with Ole Miss. There's been a lot of controversy behind this guy over the past couple years, but needless to say, he's a great coach. At the end of the day, he wins ball games, and he brings a different attitude to the SEC that they kind of need. He kind of brings, I guess you would call it a WWE type character, along with Mike Leach, who's going to be at Mississippi State, and we'll get to that in a minute. He's out there. He's wild, and he knows how to recruit. I mean, he went down to FAU and brought them, I think, to a 10-3 season and beat SMU in the bowl game. Remarkably, I think they beat him pretty good too. Ole Miss finishes 39th in standings for recruiting, and they finish with 3 4-stars and 14 3-stars. Obviously not the best recruiting class, but again, for, the competition that they're up against, when you talk about the Alabamas and the LSUs and SEC West in general, it's just so tough to recruit. And you think of all the great coaches that are in there right now, Saban and now Mike Leach and Jimbo Fisher at A&M. I mean, SEC's tough. SEC West is in my opinion, probably the best division in college football. I mean, I think you could match up any of those teams on any given day, and they'd have a chance to win. So, as Ole Miss goes into the season, I think they need to just figure out who they are as a football team, and Lane Kiffin will do a great job at that. Lane Kiffin will have that program up and running. I have no doubt. Whether he'll have a lot of success, I don't know. He's like I said, he's one of those interesting coaches that may not have a winning season, but don't be surprised if he pulls out a win or two here and there against maybe an upset against Auburn or Alabama. I don't know. We'll see. So then we finish with Missouri at 50th. Obviously, they bring in a new coach. I believe, I forget his name. It's Wisnick or something like that. I'll look it up real quick. Drinkwitz, that's right. They bring in Coach Drinkwitz from App State, who went 12-1 last year. Another great hire. Don't know if he's going to be able to compete in the SEC East for a while. Georgia and Florida are kind of dominating that right now, and obviously Mullen's and we'll get to that in a second as well. Tennessee, but yeah, Missouri finishes 50th in recruiting. They bring in 1 4-star, which is pretty good, and 16 3-stars. Obviously they lose a lot of key players. Not sure if. I think Kelly Bryant is out. Could be wrong, but yeah, they have a lot to work on this year, and a new offense, brand new system. It's gonna be fun to watch. I think they're gonna surprise some people. I think my preseason prediction as of now in February would be that they win 5 or 6 games. Obviously, they have to play Georgia and South Carolina and Tennessee and all the other schools in the SEC that are dominant right now, and it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think Drinkwitz is a great hire, and I think he's going to do great stuff there. So, keep an eye out for those guys. If you're a Missouri Tiger fan, don't get down on yourself. Give him a couple years and then kind of recap and see where y'all are at and see what he's accomplished. So let's circle back up to the top. We already talked about Georgia and a few other schools. Alabama comes in at number 2. That's no surprise. Saban always ends up in the top 3 somehow at recruiting. Not somehow, I shouldn't say somehow. He's a phenomenal recruiter, just like Kirby, and Kirby learned from him. So for Kirby to out-recruit him is pretty impressive, I think. But yeah, Saban ends up with 4 5-stars and 17 4-stars and 4 3-stars. Obviously, they bring back a lot of key players. They lose Tua to the draft. Obviously, Matt Jones is returning. So it's going to be interesting what kind of offense they bring this year. Are they going to keep the spread, or do they revert back to the old ways at Alabama, and that's the I formation, running the ball? I think it would be smart on Saban's part, especially if Matt Jones ends up being the starter, to revert back to the old ways. It seemed to work for him. Obviously, I think things kind of changed for him when Deshaun Watson beat them in the national championship. That was a big deal to him, and that's really when they started recruiting and starting dual threat quarterbacks. And ever since then, they've been very successful doing so, along with everyone else. But, with, like I said, with Matt Jones and obviously a great running back core, and they lose Jerry Jeudy to the draft and a few other guys on the outside that are great skills players, you kind of wonder what their offense is going to look like this year. I think it's going to be a mix, which, by the way, and we'll get into this in a later video, Georgia and Alabama play in the second week of the season. That's going to be it will be College game day, and it probably will be the biggest game of the year. I think it'll be bigger than LSU Alabama, only because that could be the setup to the SEC championship. Obviously, Florida's going to play really well this year under Dan Mullen, but you kind of wonder if whoever wins that game is going to be an upset alert in the SEC championship game. I think Alabama will be favored just because there's a lot of question marks for Georgia as far as new quarterback and all that good stuff. Obviously, like I said, Alabama's got a lot of new players, but it seems like Alabama's a little bit more stable than Georgia. Although some would argue that Georgia's defense is top 2 in the nation this year. So then again, LSU comes in at number 4. We'll see what Coach O can do this year. Big jump for Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher has been one of the best recruiters in the nation for many years. Obviously wins a national title with Florida State back in 2013, I believe, with Jameis Winston and Dalvin Cook and all those good guys. So obviously he knows how to recruit. He had an incredible recruiting class last year like I said, what he had to work with. He comes in at number 6 above Auburn. 26 commits, 2 of them being 5 stars, 13 being 4 stars, and 11 being 3 stars. Another excellent recruiting class for Jimbo Fisher. This is his third year? Third year at A&M, and this is his year to prove. This is going to be the biggest year for Jimbo Fisher at A&M. This will be the year that he makes or breaks it, honestly. Last year, obviously, was a tough schedule. He had to play at Clemson, at Georgia, I believe at Auburn or at Alabama. It was one of the two. At LSU, at Georgia, at Clemson, and I think at another top 10 school. So it was not an easy year for them. But this next year, they have the easiest schedule since Jimbo Fisher has been there. Again, they have a top 6 recruiting class this year. Last year, they had a top 10 recruiting class. So, yeah, this is Jimbo Fisher's time to shine, for sure. And we'll see if he lives up to the hype. Then we go to Gus Malzahn at Auburn. Finished at number 7. 16 4 stars and 10 3 stars, 0 5 stars. But Auburn has Bo Nix, and a lot of people are saying that he's a Heisman favorite this year. He'll be a sophomore. Obviously, he beat Oregon last year and beat a few other schools, including Alabama, I think. Yeah, they beat Alabama. He's no longer a freshman. There's no longer those freshman questions about Bo Nix. And so it'll be interesting to see what Auburn can do this year. Again, they play in the toughest conference. They have to play A&M. They'll have to play Alabama. They'll have to play LSU. They'll have to play all those teams in the West. It's not gonna be an easy road, and they got to play Georgia, and Georgia's gonna be a top 3 team in my opinion this year. So I think a good season for them would be 10-3, 10-2, whatever, 12, 13 games, around that margin. I'd say 2 or 3 losses for Auburn. I think if they lose to Georgia, and they lose to Alabama, I think they can beat LSU this year. I think they can beat LSU this year. Then I would say it's a pretty successful season. And then at number 8, right behind Auburn, is Florida. Florida under Dan Mullen obviously had success at Mississippi State in his tenure there with Dak Prescott and bringing Mississippi State to number 1 in the nation at one point and winning an Orange Bowl. You kind of wonder what he's going to have to do this year to prove himself. Last year, it was so close. They had a big win at the end of the year versus Virginia in the Orange Bowl to finish off the season and kind of carry them into this next season. He a great recruiter, great coach. Obviously, has proven himself at Mississippi State. Now he's got a chance to prove himself at Florida, which I think he already has in a sense, coming off of a 10-win season. The big question mark is he going to be able to get over that hump as well? Is he going to be able to beat that LSU? Is he going to be able to beat that Georgia in the biggest rivalry in college football? We'll see. Like I said, it's kind of early to do all these pre-rankings, but I kind of wanted to talk about recruiting today. I was going to touch on Lane Kiffin versus Mike Leach, but we'll get to that later as the season gets closer to us. But I kind of wanted to finish off with this one team who really surprised me. I hadn't even been paying attention to them, didn't even know they were as close as they are. Tennessee. Tennessee finishes number 10 in recruiting with 13 4-stars and 9 3-stars. And if you haven't been following college football or SEC, if you're a Pac-12 or whatever, which we'll get to in the next episode, Tennessee started off the season extremely rough. A lot of people questioned whether Jeremy Pruitt was the right fit for Tennessee, if he could really gather his players and be able to make a season out of it. I believe they started out like 2-5. But something happened during the middle of the season. He started to gain player trust. The players started to work harder than they've ever worked before, and they finished off the season 7-2, which is remarkable, unheard of for most teams that start out 2-5. I think there was even a point where players started to say that they wanted to leave. They wanted to transfer. They didn't want to be at Tennessee. They thought Tennessee was not the place for them. I think actually a few players actually did transfer. And that might have helped them. Maybe those were the guys in the locker room that just weren't willing to buy in like all the other guys. And unfortunately, that can affect the locker room sometimes. So whatever happened was a positive thing. And Jeremy Pruitt was able to turn the season around. He was able to rally the troops, and they were able to get it done. And they even won in a bowl game. So they finish off. Don't sleep on Tennessee. I will tell you that. Do not sleep on Tennessee. Jeremy Pruitt and what he did at Alabama as a coordinator, top notch. And what he's doing at Tennessee. I mean, when is the last? I can't remember the last time Tennessee had a top recruiting class. Can you? A top 10 recruiting class? Can you? Not in the past 5 years. Not since I started really paying attention to recruiting. I've obviously always been a college football fan growing up all my life, but I never really started paying attention to recruiting until about 5 years ago. I've never seen Tennessee recruit this well. Maybe Butch Jones had a recruiting class under Josh Dobbs that was close. But yeah, I know we said we're not doing preseason predictions, but my preseason prediction is that Tennessee is going to upset someone next year. Possibly a few teams. You look at Florida, Georgia. They stuck with Georgia in the first half this past year. Obviously, Georgia ran away with it, but for a while, man, Tennessee looked good. They looked like a solid football team, and that's back when they were kind of just starting to turn things around. So with that being said, congratulations to all the SEC teams. Again, 7 out of the top 10 recruiting classes were SEC. Georgia finishes number 1 for the 3rd time in 4 years. And it's going to be an exciting year. A lot of new guys coming in. Exciting freshmen that are going to be impact players to start with. And a lot of new coaches that are going to create a lot of tension in the SEC. Again, this is Nate Dogg. You've been watching Heisman Talk. Signing off. See you next episode.
You've been watching Heisman Talk. Make sure to subscribe to stay up to date for the latest college football news from around the nation.